Brother, sister, dating was always meant to be a genuine season of discernment, a real opportunity to actually get to know another person's character, values, and way of loving. Not simply momentum carrying two people forward toward a decision neither of them has actually consciously made yet. Swept along by feeling rather than genuine, deliberate choice. But certain patterns, present even in the earliest weeks or months of a relationship, tend to predict real trouble far better than most people realize, while they're actually caught up in the genuine excitement of something new and exciting. These patterns rarely announce themselves clearly or obviously. They usually just feel like enthusiasm, genuine chemistry, or simply how this particular relationship happens to naturally be, right up until the pattern itself becomes the actual undeniable problem. Today we're naming 5 things you should never date someone who does. Patterns worth taking seriously in the earliest stages of a relationship, long before any deeper commitment has actually been made, or any wedding conversation has even come up. This isn't about being suspicious of everyone you're interested in, or treating every new relationship as something to be investigated rather than genuinely enjoyed. It's about recognizing pace and boundary patterns specific to dating itself that deserve real attention, precisely because dating is the season where these patterns are actually easiest to notice and address. Long before the stakes of marriage make the same patterns considerably harder to untangle. Stay with me. If you're currently dating someone, pay close attention to whether any of these describe your relationship right now. Think honestly about the actual pace and shape of your current or most recent relationship, whatever it happened to be. Not the polished story you'd tell a close friend about how genuinely wonderful it felt in the moment, but the specific, concrete details underneath that story. How quickly things escalated, how much you actually know about this person's inner life and community, how they respond when you set a boundary. These details often reveal far more about a relationship's actual health than the general feeling of excitement or connection ever could on its own. The first thing you should never date is someone who moves at an unnaturally fast pace, pushing for exclusivity or major commitment within just a few weeks. I've never felt this way before, not with anyone else. I already know deep down that you're the one. These declarations can feel flattering, even overwhelming in a genuinely good way, especially early on. But genuine character, genuine compatibility, and genuine trust simply can't be established in a matter of weeks, no matter how intense the chemistry feels in the moment. A relationship moving faster than actual knowledge of the other person can reasonably develop isn't a sign of destiny. It's often a sign that intensity is being mistaken for depth. Consider what actually gets skipped entirely when a relationship accelerates this quickly and this dramatically. Genuine character reveals itself gradually, through how someone handles disappointment, stress, disagreement, ordinary life, none of which a few intense weeks of excitement can actually reveal. Someone rushing toward major commitment before any of that has had time to surface isn't necessarily being dishonest, but they are, functionally, asking you to trust something that hasn't actually been demonstrated yet. The second thing you should never date is someone who consistently avoids any real conversation about faith or values, keeping things deliberately surface level. Every attempt to talk about what actually matters most, your genuine convictions, your real priorities, the kind of life you're each hoping to build together, gets gently redirected back toward lighter, safer territory. This avoidance rarely gets named directly or openly. It simply happens, conversation after conversation, until months have passed and you realize you still don't actually know where this person stands on the things that matter most. Genuine compatibility requires genuine conversation. A relationship that can't sustain that conversation isn't actually building toward anything solid. Notice the specific texture and quality of this particular kind of avoidance, since it rarely looks like outright refusal. It usually looks like humor deflecting a serious question, a quick subject change, or vague, non-committal answers that technically respond to what was asked without actually revealing anything real. If you find yourself, months into a relationship, still genuinely uncertain what this person actually believes or values most deeply, that uncertainty itself is meaningful information, not simply a gap that more time together will eventually fill on its own. The third thing you should never date is someone who won't introduce you to their life, their friends, their family, their actual community, for months at a time. A new relationship naturally and reasonably takes some time before meeting everyone significant in someone's life. And that's completely normal and expected. But when months pass, and the people who actually know this person well remain entirely absent from your view, that's worth taking seriously rather than simply patient about. Someone genuinely building a future with you tends to want the important people in their life to actually know you too, Prolonged, unexplained separation from someone's actual community is worth asking about directly rather than quietly accepting. Consider the range of genuine reasons someone might actually offer for this specific pattern, and whether those reasons actually hold up under simple scrutiny. "My family is complicated" can be a genuine, reasonable explanation, or it can be a convenient excuse that never actually resolves no matter how much time passes. The distinguishing factor is usually whether there's an actual, visible trajectory toward eventual introduction, or whether the explanation simply gets repeated indefinitely without anything ever changing. The fourth thing you should never date is someone who becomes defensive or dismissive the moment you bring up how the relationship would end if it doesn't ultimately work out. This might sound like an odd, uncomfortable thing to discuss while things are still going genuinely well, but how someone responds to this hypothetical actually reveals something important. A healthy response treats the question as reasonable, even if the relationship never actually ends that way. A defensive, guilt-inducing, or dismissive response, treating the mere question as evidence you're not fully committed, reveals someone more interested in controlling the relationship's narrative than genuinely respecting you as a whole person with legitimate concerns. Think about why this particular question actually matters so much, beyond simply being an awkward hypothetical to bring up. Someone's reaction to it reveals how they handle vulnerability and disagreement in general, not just their feelings about the relationship potentially ending. A partner who can discuss even the genuine possibility of separation with real maturity and consistent respect is showing you something valuable about how they'll likely handle every other difficult conversation a real, lasting relationship inevitably requires along the way. And the fifth, maybe the most important of all, someone who pressures physical or emotional intimacy ahead of where you're actually genuinely comfortable. This pressure rarely looks like an outright, obvious demand. It usually looks like repeated requests after you've already clearly said no, guilt subtly implied when you set a boundary, or a narrative that frames your hesitation as somehow the actual problem in the relationship. Genuine respect for another person includes genuine respect for their stated boundaries, without requiring repeated justification or gradually wearing down their resistance over time. Pay close attention to what actually happens in the moments right after you set a boundary. Someone who genuinely respects you accepts it, even if they're disappointed, without turning your boundary into an extended negotiation or making you feel responsible for their disappointment. A pattern of gradual pressure, however subtle, however patient it appears on the surface, is still pressure, and genuine love was never actually meant to require you to slowly abandon your own stated comfort in order to keep someone satisfied. So what does it actually look like to date wisely, watching for these 5 patterns? It looks like welcoming a pace that allows genuine knowledge to actually develop, rather than being swept along by pure intensity. It looks like insisting on real conversation about faith and values, rather than settling for permanent surface-level comfort. It looks like expecting genuine integration into someone's actual life within a reasonable time frame. It looks like noticing how someone responds to hard, honest questions, even hypothetical ones. And it looks like holding your own boundaries firmly, regardless of any pressure applied to move past them. None of this means demanding a perfect relationship, or treating every early nervousness as a disqualifying red flag. Genuine relationships take real time to build, and some awkwardness or uncertainty early on is simply normal. But these 5 specific patterns aren't ordinary early relationship awkwardness. They're consistent signals worth taking seriously, long before deeper commitment makes them significantly harder to actually address. Here's a simple diagnostic for each of these 5 patterns, if you want somewhere concrete to start evaluating your own dating relationship honestly. For rushing pace, has this relationship actually included enough time and shared experience for genuine character to reveal itself? Or has intensity simply substituted for that necessary time? For avoiding faith and values, could you actually articulate, right now, what this person genuinely believes and prioritizes? Or would you mostly be guessing? For withholding introduction to their life, is there an actual, visible trajectory toward meeting the people who matter to them? Or does the explanation for the delay simply repeat without ever changing? For defensiveness about hypothetical endings, how did they actually respond the last time you raised a difficult or uncomfortable question, whether about the relationship's future or anything else genuinely important? For pressure around intimacy, can you recall a specific instance where you set a boundary and it was fully respected without any pushback, guilt, or repeated requests afterward? None of these questions are meant to manufacture suspicion in a genuinely healthy, growing relationship, or to treat every early uncertainty as automatically disqualifying. Dating inherently involves some awkwardness, some uncertainty, some natural nervousness as 2 people gradually get to know each other. The goal isn't flawless perfection from day one. It's honest pattern recognition, distinguishing between normal early relationship growing pains and genuine warning signs that tend to predict real difficulty later. Consider how differently a relationship unfolds when these 5 patterns are actually noticed and addressed early, compared to one where they simply get overlooked in the excitement of something new. A relationship built on an appropriate pace, genuine conversation about what matters most, real integration into each other's actual communities, mutual respect even around hard hypothetical questions, and consistently honored boundaries tends to develop into something genuinely trustworthy over time. A relationship missing these things can still feel exciting, even wonderful, in the moment, right up until the underlying pattern eventually surfaces in a way that's considerably harder to address once deeper commitment has already been made. This isn't meant to make dating feel like a constant audit, scrutinizing every word and gesture for hidden red flags. Most relationships, even genuinely good ones, will have occasional moments that could technically fit one of these 5 patterns without actually representing anything alarming. The distinction that matters is whether these are isolated, addressable moments, or genuine, unaddressed, repeating patterns that define the relationship's actual character over time. Scripture calls believers to genuine wisdom and discernment in every area of life, including the relationships that will eventually shape an entire lifetime together. Taking dating seriously enough to actually watch for these 5 patterns isn't cynicism about love. It's simply taking seriously how consequential these particular decisions actually are, and giving yourself the best possible foundation for building something genuinely lasting, rather than something that merely felt exciting in its earliest weeks. If this stirred something in you, brother, sister, don't scroll past it. Subscribe to Biblical Warning now, and let's keep examining these hidden places together, one warning at a time.